Mandy-Winter Chapter 9. Mandy had a fever the following morning. Her temperature went soaring up. Though she was not nearly as ill as she had been the night of the storm, she lay in bed feeling very sick indeed. Dr. Matthews hurried over to Cranton House earlier than usual. Anne had telephoned him the minute she discovered Mandy's condition. He teased Mandy gently. "Now, my dear young lady, don't tell me you're getting sick again. We can't have that." After a careful examination, he announced that she was suffering a small relapse. "Nothing too serious," he told Anne. "We'll just have to retrace our steps a little, that's all." He turned to Mandy. "I'm afraid it's back to bed with you for a while, Mandy. You've just been coming along a little too fast. Recovering from these illnesses takes time." He patted her hand. "I'll come by this evening. You do as this good lady tells you, and you'll be on your feet again in no time." Mandy felt reassured. Truthfully, she was quite glad to be confined to bed again. She was still emotionally confused from her talk with Bill the night before, and bed seemed to be the safest and most peaceful place right now. She slept a great deal, and when she wasn't sleeping, she lay listlessly staring out the window at the snow-covered garden. Jonathan visited her in the late afternoon. Seeing Mandy's wan face and knowing that she was ill again seemed to scare him a little. He didn't stay with her long. Having confirmed for himself that she was still alive, he left her in Anne's capable hands and went about his business. When Dr. Matthews returned in the evening, he brought Matron Bridie with him. Mandy had no wish to see Matron or to be reminded of the orphanage. She would be returning there soon enough. She felt petulant at what she took to be Matron's interference. Matron requested that she be left alone with Mandy to discuss something important. Was she going to deliver the long-awaited lecture? Or was she going to say it was time to pick up the threads of her old life again? Mandy sank down into the warmth of the bed covers and wished she didn't have to hear anything at all. She stared fixedly ahead as Matron drew up a chair and sat beside her. "Mandy, I have an invitation for you from the Fitzgeralds. I wanted to speak to you alone to find out your thoughts on the matter before I got back to them. They'd very much like to have you spend Christmas here with them at Cranton House. Do you think you might like to do that?" Mandy couldn't believe her ears. She turned her head slowly and stared at Matron. Relief and happiness washed over her in a great wave. She was so thrilled that for a moment she couldn't think of anything to say. Matron smiled as she looked at her joyous face. "Well, well, I see that you would like it very much indeed. I'm delighted. In that case, I'll tell Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald that you may stay, and that I shall collect you the day after Christmas, say around noon. How does that suit you?" Mandy found her voice. She spoke with emotion. "Oh, that's fine, Matron, just fine. Thank you so much. Oh, golly, it's going to be such an exciting Christmas." The days sped by quickly. Mandy's health improved rapidly, though she stayed in bed most of the time. But she was busy, happily painting and drawing and cutting out cards as gifts for everyone in the house. On Christmas Eve, Mandy and Jonathan made paper chains to hang in the library where the Christmas tree was going to be. And in the early evening, after dinner, Mandy was allowed downstairs to help the family with the rest of the decorations. Bill and Brendan had brought in a huge fir tree that they had cut down on the estate. It nearly touched the ceiling. Bill stood on a ladder, and the children passed up to him the tinsel and lights and ornaments. At the appropriate time, Bill signaled for everyone to stand back, and he turned off the overhead lights. Then he touched a separate switch, and the Christmas tree suddenly burst into life, glowing and twinkling in the darkened room. It shone like a fairy tale tree. The silver and gold ornaments reflected color from the lights, and toy soldiers and gingerbread men and dancing ladies spun lazily from the branches. The tinsel angel at the very top of the tree seemed to be smiling down on everyone. They all applauded loudly. Samson served mulled wine for the grown-ups and hot chocolate for the children, and then they all sat by the fire in the darkened room and roasted marshmallows and told Christmas stories. Mandy felt suffused with happiness. She wondered what all the children at the orphanage were doing and remembered her other Christmases there. It was a surprise to discover that feeling this good was actually a painful experience. She shut out her memories and tried to concentrate on this most wonderful time. Here's a picture. Decorating the tree. Christmas morning was noisy and cheerful. Mandy and Jonathan received stockings filled with all manner of goodies and nonsense and sweets and fruit. Jonathan had a toy bugle in his stocking, which he insisted on blowing outside Mandy's room at a terribly early hour. He made so much noise that she laughingly hid beneath the bed covers until he stopped. The day swung joyously from one happy moment to another. Presents were distributed to everyone. Mandy had never received such lovely gifts. Bill and Ann gave her a beautiful red dress. It had an old-fashioned white lace collar and frilly lace cuffs, and there was a pair of red shoes with silver buckles on them to go with the dress. They also gave her a tiny gold signet ring with her initials carved on it, and miraculously it fit her third finger perfectly. Mandy vowed to herself that she would never, ever take it off. Jonathan gave her a cuddly teddy bear made of something that was as soft as rabbit's fur. It was a dark brown bear with black ears and a black nose, and its eyes were a deep hazel color and seemed to be looking straight at Mandy. She received books to read and crayons to color with, and she thought that no other girl in the whole world could be so lucky. At lunchtime, a light meal was served in the small dining room, and Bill told so many silly stories that Mandy and Jonathan practically slid under the table with laughter. In the afternoon, everyone slept, and later Jonathan and Bill left the ladies and went out for a walk by themselves. In the early evening, everybody dressed up in his best clothes. Mandy wore her new red dress and shoes. When everyone was ready, Anne led them all to the big formal dining room. She flung open the double doors, and everyone cried out with delight. The room was completely illuminated by candlelight. Candles were everywhere, on the tables, on the mantelpiece, and on the small pedestal tables by the windows. It was a beautiful sight. Bill looked at his lovely wife and murmured, "I think you must have used up this month's and next month's allowance." Anne nodded happily. "I did, darling, but this is our first Christmas here, and I want us to remember it always." He planted a kiss on her forehead. "I somehow think we will." The turkey dinner was delicious. Afterward, Anne played carols on the organ in the library, and they all sang until they were hoarse. Finally, at a very late hour, the wonderful day came to an end, and everyone retired to bed. Long after Bill and Anne and Jonathan had said good night, Mandy lay in the darkness of her room, holding her new teddy bear close and reflecting how happy she had been the past few weeks. With a sudden shock, she realized that it was all going to be over tomorrow. Matron was coming for her at noon, and she was going to be taken back to her old life at the orphanage. It was an unbearable thought. Sadness overcame her, and though Mandy fought it with all her strength, she submitted to the worst depression of her whole life. She tried to tell herself that it was selfish to feel this way after having had such a wonderful Christmas. She was so much luckier than the other children at the orphanage. But it didn't help, because although she felt guilty, she wanted desperately for the happiness to go on. She wanted to hold on to it and keep it for always. Mandy tried to console herself with thoughts of the beautiful gifts she had received that day. She would treasure them always. They would remind her of this best ever Christmas. But why couldn't it go on? Why couldn't she stay here with Bill and Anne and Jonathan forever and ever? She remembered her conversation with Anne, and Anne telling her that they weren't sure that they could afford to keep Granton House. So obviously they couldn't afford to take care of one extra person as well. And even if they could, why would they want to? It seemed to Mandy that all the good things in life had to come to an end. It had been that way with the cottage, too. She wept silent tears, and her emotions spun around and around. The night lengthened. Mandy heard the clock in the lounge chime twice. The minutes ticked away. She stared at the windows and a pinpoint of light that was the moon, and she came to a brave decision. No matter how sad she felt, she would not show her sadness to anyone. She would let Bill and Anne know that this had been the happiest time of her whole life. She would not let them see her greed and selfishness, and would leave them with as good an impression of herself as possible. She would try to be strong. Having made the decision, Mandy wept all over again.